Okay, we're on. Let's see. Okay, great. Um, well, thanks for joining us, Trent. To everyone who's joining the call live or watching this after, we have a treat today. We've got Trent McGonaghy from Ocean Protocol joining us and telling us more about what they do and some of the exciting stuff that they're doing to democratize training data, AI, and other applications. We will go through some materials that Trent will present, and then we'll go into Q&A. So Trent, with that, maybe an intro about yourself, your background, and the company.
All right. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity to engage with the audience too. It's gonna be fun. Uh, so some background. I spent almost 20 years doing AI, applied AI largely for designing computer chips and creative AI. So AI to help drive Moore's law and things like that, and a whole variety of things. Everything from sort of the run-of-the-mill building classifiers and regressors to density estimation, optimization, a whole bunch of other things, a variety of tools. So I did that for a long time, and then about 2013, I started hacking on Bitcoin, and by 2014, I had found myself, really deep down the rabbit hole and went full time into it. And so I've been in blockchain space then for about 5 years, pretty intensively. Um, via first of all Ascribe, which is doing IP on the blockchain, and we were one of the first blockchain companies on the planet. Everyone thought we were crazy back then. And then we ran into issues of scale, so that led us to be building BigchainDB, which is a scalable blockchain database. So basically, it wraps MongoDB and gets all of its scale and querying and all of that, but yet it's decentralized, immutable, has assets. And more recently, about a year and a half ago, I started asking, what are the interesting relations between AI and blockchain? And at the same time, seeing, this rising issue about how, uh, because of AI, big companies were using data as a moat, and it has some really dangerous precedents. So that's what led us to be building Ocean. So we really started working on Ocean pretty intensively about a year ago, and now it's we've really doubled down on the efforts and are really driving it towards that. We still do keep shipping BigchainDB and Ascribe. Focus on BigChain and Ocean, a little less on Ascribe. So that's what I do. So in summary, AI and blockchain person. So, and to me, the most interesting part is the intersection of the two, and that's really what Ocean is about.
Got it. And it sounds like the 2 to 3 entities that you guys are operating, they all belong to the same holding company, or these are separate companies?
So Ascribe and BigchainDB both belong to BigchainDB GmbH, which is a German company. Ocean is actually launched by two companies, being launched by us, BigChain, as well as DEX, which was a centralized data exchange in Singapore. And they ran into issues that they realized was because of the centralization. And so it was basically from conversations with them, as well as with Toyota research around self-driving cars, and that's sort of some of the things that catalyzed leading to Ocean. So Ocean itself is actually a direct collaboration between two companies.
Hmm.
So and overall, then basically, you can think of BigchainDB, the company, focusing on two things: BigChain and Ocean, really, and then Dex is focusing on just an Ocean. And we have the resources for all of this, of course. And these days, I'm spending the majority of my time on Ocean, simply because there's a lot of early stage technical challenges to be done, and I find it super exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think having kind of gone through your white paper and some of your decks and materials, I think you guys are solving something pretty big out there. Why don't you walk us through high level what problems you guys are exactly solving and what the product is?
Sure, my pleasure. So I'm going to just pull up the screen sharing here. Let's see here. Application window. Oh, sure. Okay. All right. So I'm just gonna let's see here. I'll go super fast through some of this. So one of the pretty interesting things in the world of data is um, about 15 years ago, people realized that as you add more data, you can keep your algorithms the same. You can add more data and get way more accuracy. So, traditionally in the world of AI, including even work I did in the 90s, we would just, spin our wheels on algorithms, trying to, have a fixed data set and then try to have better algorithm. But, starting in the early 2000s, people realized, oh, wow, let's keep the algorithm the same and just have way more data, like 10x, 100x, 1000x more data. And then you can bring your error rates from like 25% down to like 5% or 1%. And that is really profound, right? It's really kind of a radical departure of thinking. It's also kind of embarrassing to AI researchers because it means that it's not about inventing the AI algorithms. It's actually about just getting more data in, right? And, you can extend that to the last 5 or 7 years where deep learning has taken off. And that's really what's happening there is deep learning itself loves data, right? Deep learning basically takes neural network models that were around in the early 60s, nonlinear perceptrons, and just throws gobs and gobs of compute power at them and tons of training data, right? And so that's why we can even get farther along and solve some really interesting problems. So, deep learning loves data. Deep learning is the modern AI that most people are using. But there's a problem with that, right? And that is the following. If you think about Google, Facebook, all these guys, they're realizing that if they have more data, then they can build better AI models, which are more accurate. And then from that, they can actually target their ads better, so they can make more money, right? So, in short, more data, more money. And so they see data as a moat. And they're actually even getting this sort of data flywheel effect where, more data, more models, and so on, and it's kind of cutting everyone else out. So, the majority of ad revenue on the web now is Google and Facebook. And also, there's another related challenge here, and it's about your personal data, right? It's inside these big silos, right? Google, Facebook, etc. And you could say they can say, well, you can pull it any time. The challenge is all of your friends are on that those same sites, right? So it's a very high switching cost. So there's kind of this challenge that you've got these companies that are more powerful than most nations that really have very strong control of your personal data. And you're kind of locked in, and if you decide not to engage, then you don't really have any real alternatives. Yep. So you can kind of summarize this problem as siloed data with no economic incentive to share. So silos and bad incentives, right? And so what we are doing is saying, let's do something about this by addressing the silos and addressing the incentives. So in terms of the silos, what we said was, or are saying with Ocean is, instead of siloing the data, let's try to pool the data. Right? And you can ask, well, are there actors out there that might be incentivized to do this? It's not necessarily Google or Facebook, but it turns out that there are two major groups of entities. One of them is, if you're not Google and Facebook or one of these, those guys have both the data and the AI, right? But if you're one of the other Fortune 500 companies, then you have tons of data, and it's just sitting there. It's sitting there latent, gathering dust. People are trying to figure out how to extract value from it. But to really extract value, you need AI, right? The challenge is enterprises have a really tough time hiring AI people because the AI people are all off starting their own startups trying to make money because they see that they're much more valued and they can make more money by doing startups. The challenge is when they're doing these startups, they don't have any data. So they're starving for data. They're trying to build models. They have the algorithms, but they just don't have the data. So you've got these one side the data halves and the other side the AI halves. And what they really need to have is be talking, right? So that to connect them somehow, right? And ideally, you have some sort of substrate to make them really easy to talk to each other. And so what we envision is, imagine you have a bunch of marketplaces out there that are connecting, that make it really easy for different groups of data scientists and AI researchers to connect with the people, the big data folks in the enterprises. And maybe one marketplace is focusing on financial data, and another one a bit more on sentiment data on Twitter and stuff like this, and various offerings. And that's all fine and dandy, but then you have a challenge for each marketplace itself is really becomes its own little silo. So you really need liquidity among the marketplaces, right? And so and there's a really great example we have for liquidity in another space, and that is with the airline industry. If you go to kayak.com, you'll search for a flight from, say, Boston to Berlin, and you'll see that there's a whole bunch of flights from a whole bunch of airlines, and that's really great, and you can search and sort and so on. You go to Expedia, and you'll have access to the same data via a slightly different interface. Then you go to Trivago or Hitmonk or other sites, and they're even different interfaces yet, right? So you've actually got a database below that has all the different airline flights available, then it's exposed to all these different marketplaces, right? That's really, really awesome, right? It means that the innovation is happening at the higher levels, like interfaces and so on. So that exists in the world of travel. It's a database called Sabre/Amadeus, right? But in the world of data itself, we don't have that, right? But imagine if we did. Imagine if we had a Sabre or Amadeus, but for data itself. That's what Ocean is about. So Ocean is a substrate by which you have all this data at being made available for sale, as well as the commons. We can incentivize that. I'll get to that later. And then marketplaces can hook into this, and they have benefits because they get increased liquidity, increased supply, all of this, right?
Yeah.
And then of course the end users benefit too. So that's kind of the conceptualization of Ocean. But then, so that's the start, to sort of form toward this new data economy. But there's a second half too, and that is basically we've talked about the silo data and how we can address that via the marketplaces. But then what about incentives to share, right? What's going to get people to want to put this stuff on at all, right? And it turns out that in the world of blockchains, people talk about incentives, but I like to frame it as twist it around and say, what you can do is blockchains are a way to get people to do stuff by rewarding them with tokens. What are the tokens? Well, it's literally magic internet money, if you will, right? You have these block rewards that come out every minute or 10 minutes or whatever, based on actions that you want people to do, right? So, for example, with Bitcoin, Bitcoin is trying to maximize the security of its network, right? And then basically people are getting token rewards if they run compute to secure that network, right? And how Bitcoin does it is it says security is compute power, and basically makes it really expensive in terms of compute power to roll back changes to its transaction log, right?
Yep.
Because it's trying to secure the transaction log. And then it's got the sort of block rewards function, which is basically, the left side of that says your expected block rewards in Bitcoin is proportional to your hash power on the right, and then the number of tokens each block, which is right now 12.5 bitcoins.
Yep.
So that's Bitcoin. Now what about Ocean? Ocean is saying maximize the supply of relevant data. So whereas Bitcoin said maximize security, we're saying maximize the supply of relevant data, and then you get token rewards, you get block rewards if you supply data and curate it. Why curate? Simply because Ocean can't decide whether a data set is good or not. We have to leave that to the crowd. Right?
Yeah.
So what this means is curating, and we want the curating to basically be where people put their money where their mouth is. And fortunately, there's a new mechanism out there in blockchain land called curation markets. That's exactly this, right? So what Ocean is, this is the block reward, which is the very, very heart of blockchains, right? On the left, it's the expected reward, tokens for a user when they, for a data set J. And then they get reward basically proportional to how much did they bet on it, that's their predicted popularity, and how many times it was served up, how many times they served it up. And it's basically the proof to popularity. So we've got the predicted and the actual, right?
Yep.
So put another way, I'm getting block rewards if I predict that a data set is useful, and then I serve it up when asked, right? And the more that people predict on it, then the more that people ask for it and that I serve it up, the better I do. So that's really Trent, what Ocean is about at the very core.
Quick question on that, right? Is there, are you, in your marketplace, are you also providing a mechanism for buyers and sellers of data to basically discovery, in terms of, I'm a supplier of data, I might be a mechanical Turk shop, I just don't know what people want. Whatever people want, I'm willing to go out and collect the data and label it. How does that work?
Yeah, so there's two parts to this. So Ocean itself is not a marketplace. It's a substrate for marketplaces to grow on top of, right? So that's right here, right? So all these things that say DM, that's data marketplace.
I see.
And so, and then basically, what information do they have to make available to their users in querying? So the very strongest signal is the curation market signal, which is, is this thing useful or not? Do people bet on it? Is it, et cetera, right? Also, when people, submit data sets through to Ocean itself, they're adding metadata that you can then query and search against, right? Things like, this is useful for binary classification versus regression or something, or this is weather data, or this is, this is encrypted because it's medical data or something, right? And then you have to have a special KYC for that at the marketplace level, right? So basically, there is very much this question of, how do you discover new discovery? And the summary is the strongest signal is these curation markets themselves. So just going back to Ocean then. So overall, it's actually a new construction in Ocean. So before there was curation markets, but they were kind of they would sort of flail in the wind a bit because people would speculate on some idea and then put double down on money and stuff on if an idea was good or not. But it wasn't really tied to any real work or anything. And what we've done is actually bind it at the hip to work, and that's what we call a proofed curation market. So here, the proof is where it says proofed popularity here, and then the predicted popularity. This is the curation market. So this is a new sort of token model, a new token construction that we've invented just for Ocean, and we see that it can generalize quite well. And in fact, on the generalization, what we discovered is, we were working on the data stuff quite a lot, right? Many months last year. And then we kept running into this challenge of, you do have use cases, things like medical data that you want to build models on for, say, detecting breast cancer or something earlier. But you don't want to expose the data of the patients, right? So how do you reconcile that? And the answer is, what you need to do, you need to bring the compute to the data itself. And ideally, the data itself stays encrypted, right? And this is actually possible now with modern compute algorithms, things like homomorphic encryption, which is actually compute on encrypted data, right? And other sort of privacy-preserving compute. So what we realized was, overall, we wanted to be able to support these compute functions in addition to the data. And it turns out that you can do that quite straightforwardly in Ocean by generalizing. So instead of proofs of just making data available, you can actually say, and having betting on data, you can actually bet on services more generally. And these can be any computational services, whether it's privacy-preserving compute from, say, Enigma, whether it's AI-style compute from, say, SingularityNet, or more general compute from, say, Golem, right? And then it's all tied to curation markets. So you can view then Ocean as the sort of overall network of curated services, sort of like an AI services pipeline, right?
I see.
For different sorts of proofs, right? And therefore, we at the very core is data. That's where everything has to start. But then you can have it about making data available from different networks like that, whether it's Filecoin or SIA or whatever. And then to consume, like I mentioned, with everything from SingularityNet to Golem, but even prediction markets like Augur or Gnosis, and so on. So really, Ocean overall then is, you can think of it as a substrate for AI data pipelines or AI services, right?
Right. So anyone can build essentially a data mart or a data lake on top of it, right? In this case, you're showing a bunch of companies that are all essentially operating its own data mart.
Well, not quite. What I'm showing here is, so in the case of DEX, where it says DEX there, so DEX is our partner, and they're building a reference data marketplace. So that data marketplace, people can use directly, but then also other, startups or would-be startups can come along, copy and paste the code, and do their own data marketplace. And the cool thing is, all those marketplaces, they're not fighting for data itself. They have really high liquidity. Instead, where they're competing on is things like discoverability functions or just user experience in general, right? And other sort of higher level value adds, right? So and really overall, or value adds things like NuCipher has a nice technology for proxy re-encryption. It's basically a way of lining up data so that you can compute on it privately, basically. That's. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, and then in terms of the token economics underneath, how does the Ocean token plug into this at the bottom as a substrate? How does that work?
Yeah, so overall, it's right here. So you know how in Bitcoin, what is the token economics for Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin, every 10 minutes, Bitcoin gives one miner 12.5 Bitcoins. And the chance of that miner getting 12.5 Bitcoins is proportional to how much hash rate they give, right? That's really the core of the token economics, right? And then overall, why is it 12.5 Bitcoins? Because, Bitcoin has this sort of token release schedule over more than 100 years, where it started out as 50 Bitcoins, and then 4 years in, it went to 25 Bitcoins, and then 4 years in, it went to 12.5 Bitcoins, right? And that's the T in this diagram here. So that's really the token economics of Bitcoin, right? Ocean, it's a similar thing, every now and then, a user, when they serve up data, they can expect that they're going to get paid Ocean tokens block rewards of Ocean tokens,
Mm-hmm.
proportional to how much they have bet on that data, right? And just like Bitcoin, there's a curve where, over time, there's sort of this exponential of fewer and fewer tokens getting released.
Yep, I see.
In the case of Bitcoin, Bitcoin's half-life is 4 years. Ocean's half-life is actually 10 years, so it's really long time frame.
Yeah.
The reason for that is it simply takes a long time to unlock data from big enterprises. So
I see. I see. Got it. Got it. And Trent, where and in terms of the rollout of this product, where are you guys now in terms of your roadmap?
yeah, so overall we've been actually at it. I'll start with sort of the background that way. So last year when we started going down this path in February, March, we actually built a prototype with Toyota Research Institute around self-driving cars, and we announced that at Consensus last year in May. And this is a couple screenshots from that prototype. In this case, the prototype was actually built on top of BigChainDB, adding some access controls and some other things. So that's kind of what we did first, and then
And Trent, let me stop you right there.
More recently,
What
yeah.
exactly is this application on top of the autonomous driving vehicle? Is this
Yeah,
a
it's a
way
great
for the
question.
vehicles
It's
to share
actually,
data?
yeah, it's a super cool application. So overall, so Toyota, is a major automaker, of course, and they are, of course, working towards self-driving cars. And there's huge benefits for self-driving cars for society, right? You have fewer deaths because you don't have driver accidents anymore. You also have, greater mobility. People can get from A to B more readily because it's going to be cheaper, et cetera, right? All this. So there's an incentive, and then for the automakers, they're incentivized because they see, they can sell a whole bunch of new cars and technology and stuff, right? Now, it turns out that, I've talked about how data can really drive AI, right? The more data you have, the more accurate your models. So it turns out that the algorithms for self-driving cars are already quite good. They just need more data. And in fact, RAND Corporation estimated that to get to the accuracy that we need for proper production deployment, we need 500 billion miles driven, right? Now, Toyota looked at their numbers of how many miles driven they're getting every year, and they saw that it's going to take them a decade. But then they're like, well, I bet Uber and GM and all these other guys have the same problem. Why don't we somehow pool our data, right?
Interesting.
And so they reached out to us around the same time. This is one of the catalysts for us to be working on this, actually. And we said, okay, let's build a prototype of a decentralized data exchange for self-driving cars. And that's what you see in front of you, this autonomous vehicles data exchange. So it's designed for the likes of Toyota and GM and Daimler and all these guys to pool their data together, right? Now, in this first cut, it was not tokenized, so they're not fully incentivized that way. They're just incentivized because they want to ship self-driving cars, right? But it's that much more powerful if you can have, even blockchain rewards as incentives on top. So that's what we've added, and we do continue to iterate with Toyota and other large automakers and the like around this. We see it as a really great application of basically, resolving the data silos problem, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of a and then of sort of overall timeline. We're now actually we've actually built are iterating with a large government and their data in coming weeks and months, and then beyond that, we are working towards full-on Ocean prototypes. So we just released the white paper today. And the white paper is basically sort of the specification of what it is we really want to build as sort of the final thing. So it just came out. You can see February 20th. And it's on oceanprotocol.com, all that. And
yeah, by the way, to the audience, I will insert all the relevant links to the white paper and to the site after in the description of the video. So.
Okay, awesome, cool. Yeah, overall, then, in fact, I can share the white paper too, because I think it's actually interesting this way. So in the white paper, so we just released this, and in it, it's sort of our stake in the ground of, pun intended, or maybe not, you can decide, stake in the ground of where we're headed. So it's sort of the vision of what we want to do, but we've actually really added a lot of detail of what we see specifically, right? So. So now that we have this out of the way, we're moving towards two separate prototypes. One of them is a more centralized prototype that will get us all the functionality of Ocean in a centralized way, But that way we can actually start engaging with customers sort of this next level beyond sort of the things built on top of BigChain. And at the same time, we have another stream of work towards the fully decentralized version too, that there's a team working on too. So overall, we're targeting that this centralized prototype will be out there in a matter of months.
Mm-hmm.
We're not making strong promises because, and we're targeting for a production net next year, early next year, Q1. If it happens to be a quarter or two later, so be it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we do obviously have a history of building and shipping with BigChain and with DEX. BigChain DB, we went from the prototypes of fall of 2015 to releasing 0.1 in February 2016, and ever since, we've had steady releases every month or two, hitting a 1.0 last June, and keep going and going, right? For various users. So. Yeah. It's sort of more of the same with Ocean. It's not a big uncertainty for us of whether or not we will deliver. Yeah. It's only a question of time and so on.
Got it.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool. And if I were to kind of rewind a little bit, right? So today, if Ocean did not exist, right, and for people who want to pull their data together, right, what do they do? Yeah. Are there any effective alternatives at all?
Not really. So, like, if you are an AI researcher or data scientist and you want to build a model, you will be going to 10 or 20 or even 100 different marketplaces and trying to buy data from each of those marketplaces.
Mm-hmm.
And then also try to find some commons data if you can, if you find that useful and so on, right? And that will be a big pain. I have several friends who have done stuff like that and they find it super painful. And of course, sometimes that data is really messy and stuff too, so there's not even a curation element on that.
Yeah.
And so and the marketplaces themselves, they're all kind of elbowing each other and jostling and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Whereas here, we're all incentivized to actually add their data to Ocean so that they can keep even doing what they're doing as centralized marketplaces. But they make it available through Ocean. Now they've just increased their sales channels, right? So, and not only that, they can even set it up where they get some of the block rewards, right? So they're incentivized on a couple angles to go in. And it's not just the data marketplaces, it can be the compute guys too, right? So, if you're Golem, if you're SingularityNet, et cetera, you're incentivized to also be hooking into Ocean simply because of increased increased demand, right? So.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it also engenders a different kind of behavior, I think, where, you talk quite a little bit about, existing enterprises, Fortune 500 with their own data lakes, right? And sort of, what you guys did with Toyota and Daimler's and connecting all the pieces, all the people together. Let me come back here. So those are guys who have their own data silo and can share. But certainly you guys will also potentially enable a different kind of behavior where you could have a third-party supplier of data. These are the Mechanical Turks of the world, where they could say, hey, there's a big demand on this silo type of data, and there's just really none out there. Let us go out there, collect, label, and here's a big channel for us to be able to monetize and sell that, right? And really bringing together not just the existing enterprises, but also compute and certainly some of the labeling
services. Enterprises, a key thing here is, like Ocean, the blockchain isn't storing data itself. Of course, that would be, very silly because you've got petabytes and exabytes of data. But instead, the data can be stored in one of three places. It can be inside enterprise silos. It can be in a or RFS Filecoin, right?
Yeah.
And in each of those, you just if you have published this data into Ocean and then promised to make it available, then when people ask you to make it available, you better make it available. Otherwise, you lose your stake, right?
Yeah.
And you don't get your block rewards. So it's actually quite nice for enterprises because they can onboard, making their data available through a new permissions pipeline, all that. They don't have to worry about their data leaving the premises. It can be made available. Maybe they'll make it available such that compute has to be done on premise too, right? So it's actually minimizes the friction for them onboarding. Yet at the same time, we can get all the commons data onto things like IPFS Filecoin or Swarm or whatever, and that's incentivized on its own too, right? So it's these things in combination, and to me, it's the price data that the marketplace is really pricing in whatever way, and the combination of that with the free data, the commons data. these things together, that's where you get the explosive power, right? Right now, we've got sort of the silos from the enterprise side. We even have silos from the open data side, right? We've got the open data communities. We've got different AI data commons type things, but they're all pretty small because there aren't direct incentives for people to be pooling their stuff. But Ocean actually will literally be pooling this, right? And we don't have to do the work ourselves. People are incentivized to. And when you have the right incentives, amazing things emerge, right? Like Bitcoin, for better or for worse, it's using more compute power than all the top 500 supercomputers, and more electricity than small countries. But that actually points to the power of incentives, right? In the case of Ocean, it's not being wasteful that way. Instead, whereas Bitcoin's work function is based on using electricity, Ocean's work function is actually based on supplying services, right? Making data available, doing compute, etc. So it's actually really beneficial services, right?
Yep. And you guys are building it on Ethereum?
We are doing prototypes on Solidity. Obviously, we have BigChain, but BigChainDB is not suited to tokenized ecosystems right now. We didn't design it for that, right? It's really great as a database with assets on top, but not as tokens in this sort of token dynamics way. So we are doing some prototypes on Solidity, and at the same time, by the time we ship next year, we have to just see, there's a trade-off between developer ecosystem and scale, right?
Yeah.
I like the Ethereum scaling roadmap. It's credible. There's some other nice stuff out there too. I really like the Ethereum community. I think they have an amazing community.
Yeah.
And so we will see, right? But we're just not constraining ourselves to any one technology just yet.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys could be agnostic, right? Now, in terms of I'm sure folks who are reading this are curious as well. For those who are interested and jazzed about what you guys are doing, probably one of the top questions are: you guys going to do a token sale?
Yeah, so we've actually been going through a token generation event, right? And it was 3 phases. The first phase was a seed to basically super early investors and stuff, that have been with us for years. The second one was a pre-launch, which has been going on now. So we actually just completed the whitelisting last week, and then the second part of that, where the funds pass through and stuff, will be happening, I believe, early or mid-March. I forget. That's my colleague Bruce who's running that. So, and that's a pre-launch, and actually, with those, the seed is we're raising $4 million. This pre-launch, it's a total of $18 million. We didn't want to do a big raise simply because we did not see the need to do a big raise to build what we need to build, right? We know exactly how much it costs to build this sort of stuff. We've been doing it for years. If you think you need $100 million to build a network, then you're in fancy dancy land, right? You're just in fairyland. It doesn't make sense. But we do see the value of having a healthy and robust ecosystem. And so we actually do plan to do a larger sale around the time of the network launch. So targeting Q1 of next year, but we will see, right? It's to be determined. And that will fully be about the community and the ecosystem. And frankly, probably by the time we ship, we'll still have funds left over from building that we had from this sale. So we'll just leverage that towards the ecosystem too, right?
Yeah.
So, we're used to building these and shipping, and we have one of the main principles we had all along for this token generation was be as fair as possible, right?
Yep.
And we did look at not even doing any of that at all. But for us, the main reason to do it is to engage the community. So it's not about raising the money, it's actually about engaging the community and having people who really care, right? Where they have the skin in the game and they're engaged. And we actually went out of our way in sort of leading up to this to include as many data and AI people as possible. So it's people not traditionally in the crypto space. And we saw that reflected with commitments from in the form of fiat as opposed to cryptocurrencies. So of course we have the cryptocurrencies too, but and we welcome the crypto community. We've been engaged with that community a long time. But what we're targeting, this is really not something for the traditional crypto community. It's much more for people in the world of big data and AI, right?
Yeah.
Although of course we are going to see really amazing applications that are full on decentralized AIs running around there. And it's the world is going to be kind of amazing in terms of technology that way in 2 or 3 years as the stuff matures.
Yeah. And are you seeing, in terms of your customer conversations, either inbound or you guys going out, are you seeing the early use cases being with the Toyotas of the world, the large enterprises, or are you seeing actually more where these are sort of more medium-sized, smaller companies where they absolutely have no data or very little data at all to be able to say, hey, we need this to enable us to move faster against the Googles and the Facebooks of the world. Where are you seeing the action coming in terms of the spectrum of companies?
Both. So it is actually this way that I framed. The big enterprises with the latent data, certainly that. The Toyotas of the world, as well as the small startups who have been struggling with this and so on. Just had a meeting with another one from Berlin yesterday, right? So, and I come from that community, so I just call up my friends and it's like, hey, let's talk, and they reach out to me, hey, this sounds really cool, Trent, right? And then there's a third category which actually we're very excited about, and is directly in line with our values, which is our main value here. The thing that we're really trying to do is democratize data, right? Is democratize access to data and AI data and services for the common good, right? And so this third type of entity then is the NGOs that are really trying to have positive global impact. So we're talking like the AI X Prize folks, right? Where they have there's an X Prize for AI, right? And we're iterating with them. Just had another call with them today, actually. Or IXO Foundation, which is based out of South Africa, and what they're doing is tokenizing the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals, right? Or the Industry Data Commons, where they've actually been working with dozens of Fortune 500 startups Fortune 500 companies to get their data in sort of an commons setup, right? And then, these guys too, they iterate with different UN entities and stuff like UNICEF and so on. So this is of great interest to us because we see that, with Ocean, we can start making a very direct positive impact sooner rather than later. Rather than having to wait for Ocean to get strong just on sort of the big data enterprises and the small AI startups, actually leveraging these NGOs. And in their case, they have tons of data, and they aren't generally very sophisticated with that data. And so we can connect them directly to the AI researchers of the world, right? And, this is, for example, what the AIX Prize guys did manually. They actually talked to 280 NGOs in Africa, got their data, which was a huge manual effort. And then they've actually been funneling that to some of the top, research labs in the world for AI. And those AI researchers are, playing with that data, seeing what they can do. But, the X Prize Foundation had to play middleman on this, and they're having to continue to play middleman. And something like Ocean can be a platform that can just make it really easy to use and smooth and incentivized.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. The last category is certainly one that it's not obvious to me at least. That's fascinating. We've got two other questions actually on the YouTube live chat box. The first is why do you believe a corporation would trust a decentralized data marketplace when centralized marketplaces themselves are doing so poorly?
So I just want to make sure I got the question. Why do I believe that a corporation would trust a decentralized marketplace if centralized marketplaces are doing so poorly?
Yeah. So I think I know the answer to he's got two questions, but I'd love to hear it from you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, so overall, actually there are some centralized marketplaces that are doing well. There's one that Oracle bought for more than $1 billion a couple years ago, right? But in general, and Bloomberg goes back decades, right?
Yeah.
That's a data marketplace. That said, where the challenges lie is you kind of have to, they're saying trust me, right? They've got the keys, and if they've got the keys, you don't own the data, right? In a sense, with decentralized substrates, then who has the keys to the data? You do, right? Like I have the keys to my data, and I get to choose who gets to see that data when. I can decide to make it available to the common good for the public. I can restrict it to a particular region or whatever I want, and I can revoke those at any point, depending on the licensing, right? So overall, it's in terms of trust, blockchains have been framed as trust machines because it actually sort of flips this model of trust where you're kind of spreading trust among all these machines with just this security assumption that you have 51% of the network, for example, doesn't get overtaken or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So overall, you're not saying trust the sort of network in terms of an individual or a startup or anything. It's saying, okay, do you believe in the security model? Yes or no. So if there's 10,000 participants in the network, and maybe you'd have to compromise for fun. I don't know if it's all even for fun. Then 5,000 of them have to be compromised. Are you okay with that, right? And so it's actually much simpler to trust. You basically are leveraging crypto for trust rather than institutional reputation, right?
Yeah.
And we've seen big corporations all the time and governments fail in terms of trust, right? Like, throw a rock, you'll find a data breach, right? We hear about them every week.
Yeah.
And that's based on sort of this, it's a different way of thinking about it too. Like Bitcoin and Fortune 500s, they actually have different security models, right? So the traditional security model is sort of like M&M, right? Where you have this hard candy outside and then a warm chocolate yummy inside. And if you manage to chip any little tiny chunk out of that hard candy, then you can go inside and eat all the yummy chocolate, right? And that's data breaches, right, that we see. Whereas with blockchain, it flips it around, where at the very, very core, you have this really, really rock-hard nugget at the center, and it's just a list of transactions, right? And then there's like 10,000 copies of those transactions. And the only way that can get compromised is if you manage to undo 5,000 of them or whatever, right? Like crazy. And then around it, you can have messy chocolate and stuff. It doesn't have to be perfect, as long as you don't compromise that very, very, very core, right? So that is like so much harder to break, and it's gotten hardened over 10 years because every single blockchain is a giant bug bounty system, right?
Yeah.
Bitcoin is a $200 billion ecosystem. It's actually $200 billion worth of bounties. I could hack, if I had a wonderful hack for Bitcoin, I could go in and steal, $10 billion worth of Bitcoin right now, right? But because apparently people haven't found those bugs.
Yeah.
So I'll stop there. But basically, to summarize, there's at least a couple ways of framing the trust, right? One of them is crypto math-based trust versus institutional / history-based trust. And the other one is simply the flipping of the security model, right, from sort of M&M going inside out.
Yeah. No, I think one of the things that you said, Trent, earlier, I think is key, right, which is this whole idea of, this is especially true for data that have certain privacy concerns, right? I mean, you think about healthcare data and things like that, right, where it's just inherently secure and not very shareable, right? So the transfer of the data creates problems from a vulnerability, a breach standpoint, right? I mean, I think another analogy I think of, for American citizens who have seen this recently with the Equifax hack on the credit score, right? Which is centralized system, right? Your data, they did not secure it. In fact, it wasn't even a hard shell, right? It was a soft shell, and huge repercussions when that breach happened. And by the way, the other problem is also that you have no control over, even if you wanted to, pre or post hack, your data that they're storing, right? You can't change your access control to folks who are buying data from Equifax, right? So, so this whole idea of moving a lot of these data that are has value when pulled together into essentially what is a trustless ecosystem of nodes. It's almost as if, I think a lot of the blockchain infrastructure and crypto is almost built for this, right?
Yeah.
Which is really interesting, and you guys are kind of one of the first ones to kind of do both together and enable that. It's really cool.
Yeah. And actually, we have kind of a history of this, right? Like even, we started with Ascribe, which was IP in the blockchain and really zooming in on digital art. And the challenge there was, if you're a collector, how do you collect digital art? And the collectors are like, because they didn't understand, how do I own it, right? What does it mean to own it? And it comes down to, well, you own the digital art if you have the private key to that copyright rights transfer, right? And so you own the artifact if you have the private key. So it was sort of that a very practical use case that we sunk our teeth into. But it's part of this overall sort of general vision that, the cypherpunks have had for years, which is sovereign personal data, right? Where all the data that I emit as a human, I hold myself, I have all the private keys, and I give out permission to others to use that data in various ways, various contexts, and I always reserve the right to revoke those permissions at any time, right? And then this extends also to corporations, et cetera, being able to have control of different data and stuff and revoking it. But that's actually very different than just me handing over the data to some company that says, trust me, right?
Yeah.
And then they have the data breaches. It completely flips it around, right?
Yeah.
And it's a much more secure model.
Yeah, yeah. We've got one last question here, which is Ocean currently looking for community and or developer involvement? If so, are there ways for these parties to get involved to help Ocean grow?
Yeah, definitely. So, sorry, we have a few things from. Oh man, one second. So, from the just pure community standpoint, we've got a Telegram channel that is, we have community people on there to iterate with, and feel free to reach out and then line up a call to even get more deeply involved, right? And same thing from the developer standpoint. We haven't put any code out there yet. We've been obviously doing stuff internally, but we want to sort of get our ducks in a row first before we put it out there. But if you look at our track record, we clearly do this all the time. So we just want to get ourselves lined up first on that. We are hiring as well, not only from a developer standpoint, but also other non-development functions, right? And on the developer side too, it's people with crypto backgrounds as well as people with AI backgrounds or otherwise, right? So we're just looking for mission-driven, value-driven people who really want to make a difference and are willing to learn and engage, right?
And Trent, are you guys hiring primarily in the Berlin office?
No, actually. So with Scribe and BigChain, we were very restricted to just that, but we are opening up to the world basically. So
anyway,
so overall, yeah, it can be anywhere. We have a preference for people being face to face when possible, but if it is remote, then so be it. And we'll have we have face to face meetings down then anyway. Then, right? So yeah.
Got it. No, that's great. Well, we're almost getting close to the top of the hour, and we've exhausted all our questions, and this is great, Trent. Thanks for giving us the 101 on Ocean Protocol. I'm really excited about what you guys are doing. I will post all the relevant links in the description on YouTube after, and I'll repost this video into our respective groups. So this is great. This is a treat. Thanks so much for being generous with your time.
Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure.
Awesome. Have a good day, and talk soon.
Yeah.
Bye.